I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I am speaking with Deborah Riley Draper, the director of the A&E docuseries James Brown, Say It Loud. The first thing I wanted to ask you was, it's an immensely fascinating documentary, and I'm curious as to what was your first connection to James Brown before deciding to make the series?
You know what's interesting? I am born and raised in Savannah, Georgia. So my father, my uncles, everyone loved James Brown. He was this man that they, wanted to be like, wanted to dress like. They loved the music, but he also represented a sense of freedom and liberation for the black men in my family that there was no other model for. So I was always fascinated by their fascination with him. So when the opportunity came to talk to the producers about making this, I really knew where I wanted to come in, and that was coming in around that Look magazine article from 1969. Was James Brown the most important black man in America? That was a crazy question to have on a cover of a mainstream general market magazine. But when I thought about it, and I thought about how my family and the folks in my neighborhood looked at him, and I thought about how his presence changed the way people of color thought about themselves, I was like, maybe that is an important question to ask. And that's how I approached the four episodes. Was he the most important black man in America?
It's interesting that you bring up your personal connection with your family, and I'm curious as to you go into part of the fact that he was a big Nixon backer in 1972. That a lot of people in the Black community kind of felt betrayed by that. Did your family share in that emotion?
They did not feel betrayed by that. I think they understood that in that moment, he was trying to go to the power so that the power could do something powerful for the community. And a side note, my mom got to see James Brown with her sister Hazel at the Apollo before I was born. It was one of the big highlights of their lives. But they understood that sometimes you have to be able to have a conversation with somebody who could do something about the situation, and that's what he was doing. That endorsement was actually about, look, you made promises in that first campaign about black empowerment, black economic development. I want to hold you to it, which he did not. He couldn't be held to it, but the idea of holding a president accountable for what he said in his campaign is what James Brown was trying to do. It didn't show up well, and there was some backlash, but he came with another funky track right after that, and everyone came back into the fold.
Um, so, you have a lot of interesting people that you interviewed for this. Everything. Everyone from like civil rights leaders like Al Sharpton to his children and his adult children to celebrities like Mick Jagger and cultural icons. And I'm curious, did you find yourself starstruck by any of the subjects that you interviewed for this?
I wasn't starstruck, but what I will tell you is that being able to meet Mick Jagger was truly an honor. He is someone that is not only has a musical career of his own, he's actually someone that knows music history, and he actually knows so much about James Brown because they had a lot of conversations from the first time they met in the 60s, to well later into all of their careers. And I think being able to talk to him about music and what music was like in the 60s and what was actually happening and why James Brown was such a phenomenon from someone who would also become a phenomenon. It was really great to be able to ask him those deep bench questions about what does it take? What do you have to sacrifice? What do you have to give up to have that level of a trajectory? And what do you need to have engine wise, your internal clock to be able to accomplish that? And when Mick Jagger said in his life, he's never seen a better performer than James Brown, and he's never seen anyone who's worked harder being the best performer than James Brown. For someone who's been performing 7 decades, it speaks to what he was and who he was and how he impacted everyone from Mick Jagger to Questlove to LL Cool J to Dallas Austin to Al Sharpton to all of us, right?
Absolutely. Um, it's interesting. I've always found it very interesting in the last, I want to say maybe like 10 years, the rise of the docuseries of, just not making a documentary film, but making it as, an actual series. And I'm curious as to how did you decide how to structure this series?
Well, I decided to structure it literally from his birth to his death. And I looked at each of those 4 episodes as a particular period in time. That first episode was really about the birth of this icon, who he was, what he went through, the lived experience he has as the child that would inform him as a performer. That second episode was really about him discovering his voice and becoming the voice of a community, the voice of a nation after the assassination of Martin Luther King. And say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud, becoming this mantra that literally, soothed people as they grieved post assassination. And that third episode was what happens, when you're no longer seen as the most important Black man in America and you're keeping up with disco and hip hop's merging and you're trying to ensure your legacy, but the wheels are coming off. All things are happening in ways he didn't plan personally and professionally, and he is not maintaining those personal demons in a way that we probably thought he could and that he should. And that fourth episode was post prison to death and what that looks like when you are a man of a certain age and you realize you changed music. You really are the godfather of hip hop, and so many people are sampling your music. Where does that put you in the legacy and in the canon of music icons? So that's kind of how I looked at it. How did he begin? How did he grow his brand? How did he maintain his brand when there were lots of external forces coming, as well as internal forces getting in his way? And then how does he, at the very end of his life, remain that icon? And for me, that performance with Pavarotti, when I every single time I cry, every single time, because the way he sings it, and you could feel the pain and you can feel the joy and you can feel those 70 years of being James Brown in every single note. And I thought it was one of the most beautiful performances I'd ever seen, but it also summed up a career of a man who was at the end of his life, but his life was going to live on as an incredible, amazing musical and cultural and social activism life.
It's interesting how you talked about how you were structuring it and the fact that there's a lot, James Brown was a very complicated man. And you go into, as you talk about his demons. And the interesting perspective in the documentary is with Brown's adult children being very much a part of both the glowing and the not so flattering parts of it. And I'm curious as to what have Brown's adult children had to say about the doc since it premiered?
Well, at the Apollo when we had the premiere, the thing that stuck with me first actually came from his son. That wasn't his son, Reverend Al Sharpton, and he said this was the most honest, comprehensive docuseries or documentary about James Brown that he had ever seen. And both his daughters felt that in the telling of the story through my perspective and my lens, I made their father human. I did not make him perfect. I unpacked his flaws. I unpacked the trauma he had as a child. I unpacked the good, the bad, the human, and the ugly of a man. Because I wanted to look at him as a human, as a man who had flaws, a man who made mistakes, and a man who made incredible music. And they agreed with the beats of each episode and the beats of the series. So I'm very happy and pleased that they felt it was authentic and they felt it was honest and that they felt it captured their father.
There's so much footage that I imagine you had to go through for all of this. I imagine it was probably, in terms of the documentaries that have been made, it's probably one of the more entertaining series of archival footage you had to go through for this. How many hours of archival footage did you have to go through in the making of this?
Over the course of almost 3 years, I think we have, oh my gosh, over 4,500 individual archival assets, a couple hundred hours of interviews, and thousands of hours of archival footage, from James Brown, right, from the 50s until the 2000s. But also, in telling the story, I also wanted to look at this Black man against the context of Black America. So you see Zora Neale Hurston footage in there from the 20s, right, to kind of explain what Southern life looked like in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s when, James Brown's parents were young, when they had him, because we can't look at him in isolation. We have to provide context of not only how he was evolving, but how the country around him was evolving, how music was evolving, how race was evolving, how culture itself was evolving. So you see the Chitlin circuit, you see Vietnam, you see the world that he had to exist in. So there was lots of archival footage, and I wanted to paint that world so you can feel it. And also I want to ensure that you could feel what a concert felt like if you'd never been to one, so that you could see that energy. You can almost feel the sweat coming across your screen. So that particular painting of a canvas of a James Brown performance, when he's giving you everything and he's leaving everything on the stage, I really wanted people to feel that. And I wanted them to feel him. And the other reason archival was important is, as you watch each episode, you hear Mr. Brown narrating. He's telling you what he's thinking. He's telling you how he's feeling. He's telling you, whether it's an argument with Sid Nathan or the choices he had to make, what he regrets, his feelings on sampling. So I thought, in addition to all the amazing voices that are a part of this series, the most important one was James Brown himself.
There's so many subjects that you go into with this series, but I'm curious as to, was there a subject you wish you could have included in the final product or gone a bit more into detail about, but for one reason or another you just weren't able to?
I think the entrepreneurship and the self-determination and the self-empowerment that led him to really do those James Brown stamps and to really push on Richard Nixon about Black business enterprise. I wish I could have spent a little bit more time around that, because I think that would clarify a little bit more his position on why he went to Richard Nixon, and why that was important to him. Being someone who only had a seventh grade education and being able to try franchises, buy a private jet, open radio stations, really have this big thinking, big vision, I think is rather extraordinary. And his creative genius and also his innovation, I would have loved to spend more time on that. Because it's extraordinary, and it's a great blueprint and a lesson plan for all of us to know that we can have these big thoughts and bring them to life. And you don't have to have the perfect upbringing or have gone to the perfect business school, or have parents who've done it before you. He was completely self-made. And that's absolutely fascinating and inspiring.
What were you most surprised to learn about Brown over the course of making this?
It was the stamps. The stamps, one, they had his face on it, and he was the master at branding. Like, the records had his face on it, the stamps had his face on it. But he did this with the attorney for the Black Panthers and an Oakland Raider football player. It was just a strange triumvirate, those three things. I think the other thing that was interesting to me, and quite a surprise, was really the fines. Like, I knew he was fining the band, but like, wow, he was so strict. And $50, $10, $20, $100. And then he would use the fines to do things for the band too. So I thought that was the soft part of the fines. But his perfectionism and his ability to ensure that people receive their money's worth, I thought that was a really important character trait. Um, and maybe excessive, but certainly it was a very driving factor into why those shows were so incredible, and why people would come year after year after year to see those performances and wait in line forever to get in there. And I thought for someone who didn't have any formal training, he understood performance, he understood branding, and he understood how to captivate an audience and how to entertain.
Last question I want to ask is, from your personal perspective, what is the most iconic thing about James Brown? I give you three choices here: voice, dance moves, or hair. Which one? Which one is the most iconic for you?
The voice. Good God, I'm going with the voice. I'm going with the voice. And that's, that's not a fair question, right?
Yes, I understand that completely.
Okay. Okay, I just want to be clear that you understand that I really can't choose between the footwork, the hair, and the voice, but I'm gonna take the voice because I love the voice.
And I don't think I've ever heard anybody be able to do that. I'm not even going to try to do the scream that he does, but I'm not even going to try to do that because that just wouldn't do justice to it. But
Yes.
like I don't know anybody who can do it. I know people that can do the dance moves. No one knows can do. Yeah,
Chadwick did the dance moves. Chadwick pulled off the moves.
he
Um,
did.
but the voice, that guttural sound that he pulls from somewhere special and deep that comes out, and he can scream on key. Yeah, it's a game changer. No one of one. That's only him.
Well, Deborah, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best over the next couple of months. And to all our viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to this video. And don't forget to keep going to goldderby.com to make your Emmy predictions in anticipation of the nominations in July. Thank you so much.